Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Unfiltered and Unapologetic, the space where we talk about healing, growth, mindset, and becoming who we're meant to be without leaving our culture behind. I'm your host, Caitlin Gil-Soto, born and raised in Lawrence, Massachusetts, also raised between Bani and El Cibao, and proudly Dominicana. And today I want to talk about something that I think a lot of people quietly struggle with. Wanting something so deeply, but not feeling emotionally ready to hold it. Because sometimes we want the relationship, the peace, the opportunities, the softer life, the healthier version of ourselves. And when it doesn't happen right away, we start questioning ourselves. We start thinking, maybe I'm behind, maybe I'm doing something wrong, maybe everybody else figured something out that I didn't. But lately, I've been realizing something. Desire and readiness are not always the same thing. And this episode is not about shame. It's not saying you're incapable. It's about understanding that some seasons are preparation seasons. And preparation is not always visible. Sometimes it looks like emotional regulation, consistency, discipline, nervous system healing, learning how to stop abandoning yourself, building habits nobody applauds yet. Especially for those of us who grew up in survival mode. A lot of us learned how to chase relief before we ever learned how to feel safe and peace. So now we pray for calm lives while emotionally expecting chaos. We ask for healthy love while still feeling attached to inconsistency. We ask for abundance while still operating from fear. And that doesn't make you broken, it makes you human. In episode 46, we talked about inconsistency and how emotionally unavailable dynamics can create anxiety and attachment. But this episode goes deeper into something I realized afterward. Sometimes we don't just need desire for the life we want. We need the emotional capacity to sustain it. And that's what today's about. Not punishment, preparation. So, one of the hardest things to accept is that desire alone does not create readiness. Just because you want something deeply does not always mean your habits, emotional patterns, mindset, or nervous system are prepared to sustain it yet. And I think many of us struggle with that because we live in a culture that constantly tells us if you want it enough, it'll happen. But nobody talks enough about capacity. Because you can want peace and still emotionally feed chaos. You can want healthy love and still chase inconsistency. You can want stability and still self-sabotage every time life gets calm. And this isn't judgment because I've had to confront this within myself as well. Sometimes we romanticize the outcome without understanding the identity shift required to maintain it. Healthy love requires emotional responsibility. Peace requires boundaries. Confidence requires repetition. Healing requires consistency. And many of us still feel emotionally attached to patterns that contradict the life we say we want, especially culturally. A lot of us grew up normalizing emotional chaos, overworking, people pleasing, guilt around rest, emotional inconsistency, confusion, feeling more familiar than clarity. So preparation becomes deeper than desire. It becomes reconditioning. Teaching yourself how to emotionally handle something different. And honestly, that realization changed the way I look at waiting seasons. Because now I ask myself, am I just wanting this or am I becoming someone who can actually sustain it? Something I've been realizing recently is that sometimes the issue is not opportunity. Sometimes the issue is capacity. And I mean that emotionally because a lot of us say we want peace, consistency, healthy love, emotional safety, softer lives. But when those things finally appear, our nervous system doesn't always know how to receive them, especially if we grew up around inconsistency. In episode 46, we talked about how emotionally unavailable dynamics can create anxiety and attachment. But afterward, I realized something deeper. Inconsistency was creating anxiety in me, not because I'm too emotional or too needy, but because when communication, energy, or emotional presence suddenly changes, your body can go into survival mode. You start anticipating distance, silence, withdrawal. Your body stays alert trying to protect you. You start checking your phone more, over analyzing small shifts, preparing yourself emotionally for abandonment before anything happens. And if you've experienced enough inconsistency in life through relationships, family dynamics, childhood, or survival mode, your body can start confusing anxiety with connection. Because unpredictability keeps you emotionally activated. That's why calmness can feel unfamiliar at first. And honestly, I think a lot of us grew up in environments where emotional inconsistency was normalized. People shutting down emotionally, affection being unpredictable, love existing without emotional safety, existing beside it. So now, as adults, many of us are trying to build peaceful lives with nervous systems that still expect chaos. And healing starts getting real when you realize peace is not boredom. Consistency is not lack of passion. Calmness is safety. And I think some of us are not just learning how to attract better things, we're learning how to stop emotionally rejecting them once they arrive. Because receiving is also a skill. I have the first journal prompt here for you guys. What relationships or environments trained my body to expect inconsistency? And the affirmation for this question is, I no longer confuse anxiety with connection. I think one of the biggest misconceptions people have about discipline is believing discipline means punishment, restriction, perfection, control. But the older I get, the more I realize discipline is actually preparation. It's self-respect, because discipline helps create the version of you that can sustain the life you keep praying for. And I know people love talking about manifestation, abundance, alignment, and vision boards, as I've talked about in my previous episodes, but very few people want to talk about repetition. Consistency, routine, showing up even when you don't feel motivated, keeping promises to yourself quietly. That's the part that nobody romanticizes. But honestly, that's where transformation actually happens. Confidence is built through repetition, self-trust is built through consistency, peace is built through boundaries. Emotional stability is built through regulation. And culturally, many of us developed unhealthy relationships with discipline because discipline was introduced through fear, criticism, shame, or survival. So now as adults, we either avoid structure completely or overwork ourselves trying to earn rest. But healthy discipline is not punishment. It's devotion to your future self. It's waking up and saying, my future matters enough for me to stay consistent even before results appear. And readiness is not built in one giant moment. It's built in small repeated decisions. Going to the gym even when progress feels slow, resting instead of spiraling, learning boundaries, managing your money before abundance arrives, creating before recognition appears. That's preparation. And honestly, I think some people are waiting for motivation when what they really need is commitment, because discipline is proof that your future matters to you. I have another prompt here for you guys. What small, consistent action would change my life if I truly committed to it? And the affirmation for this question is, I honor my future through consistency. I think one of the hardest parts about growth is realizing that your future may require a version of you that your current self is still resisting. Because we love the idea of transformation. We love the idea of a new life. But becoming someone new is uncomfortable. And honestly, I don't think people talk enough about the grief that can come with growth. Because sometimes growth means outgrowing old coping mechanisms, changing the way you speak to yourself, choosing peace over emotional intensity, setting boundaries that disappoint people, letting go of environments that once felt familiar, no longer participating in cycles that used to define you. And even when those things are healthier for you, your nervous system can still resist them because they feel unfamiliar. That's why healing can feel lonely sometimes. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because your old identity is losing control. And I think a lot of people experience this once they become more emotionally aware. You start realizing you don't actually enjoy chaos anymore. You don't want relationships that keep you emotionally anxious. You don't want to abandon yourself just to feel chosen. You don't want to live in constant survival mode. You don't want to keep proving your worth through exhaustion. And that shift changes everything. But it also creates tension because part of you still wants what's familiar, even if familiar hurts. And honestly, I think many people are waiting for their life to change while still emotionally clinging to the version of themselves that keeps recreating the same patterns. Because sometimes the delay exists because your current identity would sabotage the very thing you're asking for. If your nervous system still believes love equals inconsistency, healthy love may feel unfamiliar. If your identity is built around overworking, rest may make you feel guilty. If you're used to chaos, peace may feel suspicious. And this is why becoming matters. Because the goal is not just getting what you want. The goal is becoming someone who can sustain it without destroying themselves in the process. That's real growth. I have another prompt here for you guys. What part of me is afraid of becoming who I say I want to be? And the affirmation for this question is, I release the version of me that cannot carry my future. One of the biggest mindset shifts I've recently had is realizing that not every season of life is supposed to feel exciting. Some seasons are construction seasons, quiet seasons, foundation building seasons, identity shifting seasons. Quiet seasons, foundation building seasons, identity shifting seasons. And because social media constantly shows people announcing breakthroughs, relationships, money, opportunities, and success, many people start feeling like if nothing big is happening externally, then nothing is happening at all. But some of the most important growth happens invisibly first. And honestly, I think many of us underestimate quiet growth because it doesn't come with instant validation. Nobody applauds emotional regulation, consistency, learning boundaries, healing your nervous system, rebuilding self-trust, resting intentionally, staying disciplined quietly. But those things change your life long before the external results appear. And I think many people are emotionally rushing themselves right now. Rushing healing, rushing timelines, rushing clarity, rushing relationships, rushing success. But some processes cannot be rushed because if something arrives before your habits, emotional patterns, or your nervous system are prepared to sustain it, sometimes we unconsciously destroy ourselves. And honestly, I think admitting that removes shame from the process. Because preparation is not failure. Maybe your life is not stuck. Maybe you're being rebuilt. And I've had to remind myself of that too. Because there are seasons where it feels like everybody else is moving faster, everybody else is figuring out life before you. But comparison hides context. You don't know what people are emotionally carrying behind the image. And I think one of the healthiest questions we can ask ourselves is, instead of only asking, when will it happen? Ask, who am I becoming while I wait? Because eventually your own future will arrive. And the version of you that meets it matters. I have the last journal prompt here for you guys. How can I honor this season instead of constantly trying to escape it? And the affirmation for this question is, I trust the process of becoming. I want to close this episode by reminding you of something I think many people desperately need to hear right now. You are not failing just because your life is unfolding. You are not weak because you're still learning emotional regulation. You're not behind because you're still building discipline. You're not broken because you're trying to heal patterns that were normalized for most of your life. And honestly, I think many of us underestimate how much courage it takes to become emotionally aware. Because once you start seeing yourself clearly, you can't unsee it anymore. You start noticing the ways you abandon yourself, the patterns you repeat, the relationships that activate anxiety, the environments that drain you, the habits that disconnect you from yourself. And yes, that awareness can feel overwhelming at first. But awareness is also where change begins. Not perfection, not instant transformation. Awareness. And I think many of us need to stop speaking to ourselves like we're late in life, especially when many people are trying to heal while also working, surviving, paying bills, supporting family, trying to understand themselves emotionally, learning what healthy actually looks like for the first time. That's not failure. That's rebuilding. And rebuilding takes time. So if life feels slower right now, if things feel uncertain, if you still feel like you're becoming, that doesn't mean nothing is happening. Some of the most important growth in your life may be happening internally before it becomes visible externally. Your nervous system may still be learning safety. Your habits may still be changing. Your self-worth may still be catching up to your vision. Your identity may still be letting go of survival mode. And honestly, that's okay. Because the goal is not just getting what you want. The goal is being able to sustain it without losing yourself once it arrives. And maybe that's what this season is really about. Not punishment, not rejection, not failure, preparation. The life meant for you will require a version of you that feels safe holding it. Now let's do the final prayer. So put your hand on your chest and take a deep breath. Dear God, help me stop rushing. Help me trust that preparation is not punishment and that growth does not need to happen overnight to still be meaningful. Teach me how to become emotionally available for the life I keep praying for. Help me build discipline without shame, consistency without burnout, boundaries without guilt, peace without fear. Help me recognize the patterns that no longer belong in my life and give me the courage to release versions of myself that survive through chaos, fear, and self-abandonment. Teach my nervous system that calmness is safe. Teach my mind that I do not need to live in panic to be protected. Teach my heart that I do not need to chase inconsistency to deserve love. And during seasons where life feels slow, remind me that invisible growth is still growth. Remind me that becoming takes time. Amen. If this episode resonated with you, send it to someone who's been feeling frustrated with where they are in life or questioning their timing. And if you've been struggling with spiraling thoughts, emotional overwhelm, or constantly living in your head, my guide, Stop Overthinking What to Do Instead, is available now and linked in the show notes. I also have my free guide, The Emotional Reset, for anyone who's feeling emotionally disconnected, mentally exhausted, or overwhelmed lately. You can find everything linked in the show notes or in my Instagram bio at Unfiltered Unapologetic Pod. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to leave a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, or wherever you listen to the podcast. It genuinely helps more people find the show. Thank you so much for reflecting with me today, and I'll talk to you in the next episode.